Alrighty, everybody, welcome into another stream here on All Jacked Up Sports. I'm Jackson James. Thank you for joining us here on another episode of You Don't Know Jack. Let's dive right in to today's show rundown here. We got the chalkboard. We got the round one recap of the NBA draft. Then we're going to talk about some Cooper Flagg expectations, then our winners and losers, and there were some trades that I haven't talked about yet that happened before the draft. And so we're going to get into all this NBA goodness on today's show. So thank you once again for joining me. A little bit of late start. I'm trying to get more consistent with the start times for today's show, but thank you once again for joining me. Let's dive right into it, though, without wasting any more time. Let's talk about this NBA draft round one. Let me pull up the draft board from last night, and it was, a pretty standard draft. I wouldn't say it was anything crazy, anything we haven't seen before. I would say it was a pretty standard draft. Obviously, for my case, being a Mavericks fan, seeing, the Mavs have the first pick and all the Cooper Flagg hype, that kind of came after the draft lottery. It wasn't too crazy last night, and I actually tweeted this last night, so I'll shout out my Twitter right now, because I tweeted this last night. I don't know if it's on my feed. No, I did not tweet it, but I tweeted it in the reply. It was a reply tweet, and I was basically talking about how it kind of is lackluster, right? After the draft, after your team's already picked, how, kind of boring the draft kind of got. And that's what happened. There was a lot of talk on NBA Twitter of different teams trading in back into the draft, potentially drafting guys, and that wasn't the case yesterday. We didn't have too many draft trades for teams to get back in. We just saw more of exchanges of picks and whatnot. And so let's dive into it just a little bit here as I try to find a draft board from last night. Here we go. Okay, we'll just rock with this one from the NBA. .com. And so, yes, so Cooper Flagg went first overall to the Dallas Mavericks. Dylan Harper went to the Spurs, and VJ Edcombe went to the 76ers. I would say the first three picks were pretty no-brainers up until this point. There was some talk about, where does Ace Bailey go? Do the 76ers draft Ace Bailey regardless of his pre-draft antics? No, they decided to go with the guard out of Baylor, and I think this was a very solid pick. That'll pair nicely with Tyrese Maxey, who I guess now moves over to the shooting guard position. It'll be interesting to see how Philly kind of incorporates VJ into their offense. Then you have Con Knipple going to the Hornets, a deadly shooter. For the Hornets, I think they need a lot of help still. I don't think they're going to get necessarily super better in this draft, and they had a pick later that I'll get into. But I think for the Hornets, you were feeling good about your strength at other positions. They definitely need some help at the shooting. But with Con Knipple, it's going to be interesting to see how he fits. I mean, he's 6'7", right? They have Brandon Miller out there at the shooting guard position. And so does he necessarily play the three? Does he come off the bench? It'll be interesting to see how they navigate forward with the freshman from Duke. But as we move forward, then you have the Jazz drafting Ace Bailey. And this went absolutely viral on Twitter, and it was actually really funny because Ace Bailey was like, I don't want to work out for the 76ers, the Hornets, and I don't want to go to the Jazz. And he eventually got drafted by the Jazz, and there were some funny pictures going around online about his ability, him like crying, him being upset. But in his, I will give him credit where it's due. In his post-draft press conference that he had, he acted very professional, right? He was like, "Look, I controlled what I can control, and the other teams will do what they can control." And so, for Ace Bailey, I think this is a fine spot because there's not too many expectations. It's a fairly, question mark of a team, the Utah Jazz, and so they definitely need some more scoring, and that's what Ace Bailey will provide. I'm excited to see it. Will the Utah Jazz make any headlines next season? Probably not, or at least for good reasons. And so for this one, I think it's a building block for the future for the Jazz, and so I would give this one a thumbs up. And then as we quickly go forward, pretty standard picks with Trey Johnson going to the Wizards, the Pelicans getting Jeremiah Fears, the Nets with the shocker with Igor Demin. Apparently you pronounce that differently. I'm going to call him Igor because I think it's funny. out of BYU. Apparently, people were thinking this was a reach, the first real reach of the draft, according to some people. Then you have a shocking scenario that happened last night, and this is with the Suns pick. Right, it belonged to the Rockets. Right, it'll be traded to the Suns, and so my big thing with this trade is I love the pick by the Suns. Right, they needed a big man, they got it in Kamal Malawach, but now they followed that up with a trade for Mark Williams, giving up a 2029 first round pick. And so I don't love that from the center from Charlotte. I don't love that for the Suns because now you kind of have a two-headed center monster that they can't really play different positions. They're both centers. They're both play the five, and so they're not going to share the court together. Now maybe they're like, okay, Malawach is maybe a little bit underdeveloped. We'll have him come off the bench while Mark Williams starts, and we'll let Malawach develop for a couple years. It's fine. Mark Williams is also only 23 years old, so it's not like a similar situation that I'm kind of comparing it to with the Mavs and having Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. Could they be doing something very similar to where you're always going to have at least, let's say, an above-average center on the court at all times? They basically play all 48 minutes, but they split between two players. That could very well be the case. Malawach apparently is an underrated shooter, so that's technically a different archetype than Mark Williams. So I'll have to see how this one plays out. I'm very excited for Malawach's career because that guy just had a great story coming from Africa, getting seen by the NBA Academy, and eventually going to Duke and then being drafted as a lottery pick. Then there wasn't necessarily too crazy of a pick until, we got to Yang Hassan from China. He was drafted to the Trailblazers, and this dude was sitting in the stands like a normal viewer of the NBA draft, and he gets picked, and it was just quite the scene. It was very cool because it literally felt like they drafted a fan out of the stands, but a very cool story for him. He goes to the Trailblazers. Apparently people are calling him like the Chinese Jokic, which is funny. And then the Wizards drafted, this pick would be traded to the Utah Jazz. They drafted Walter Clayton Jr. This was the big name, I would say, that probably in this later part of the draft, just because of his production in the March Madness tournament. And now he gets to play alongside Ace Bailey in Utah. I think this is a great pick by the Utah Jazz. I really like it because they're kind of transitioning to guards. I've seen today that they're at least trying to move off Colin Sexton now because they drafted Walter Clayton Jr. And so, they need to revamp their team a little bit. And I really like this pick for the Utah Jazz. The Heat, I thought this Janikowskis guy was going to go a lot earlier. He falls to 20 to the Miami Heat. And then there wasn't too many crazy picks. I love the Jace Richardson pick to the Orlando Magic. Get them some more guard help because they traded Cole Anthony away to the Grizzlies in this trade, or in the trade for Desmond Bane. So now they kind of fill that need in Jace Richardson. And so that kind of does it for, the round one recap. I'm not your guy to grade each pick. I'm trying to give you my thoughts, and the picks that stood out. The Spurs did also very good in obviously getting Dylan Harper, but then also Carter Bryant out of Arizona. A lot of people are calling this maybe the best pick in the draft, just in terms of value. They got him towards the end of the lottery. The Hornets also got Liam McNeely out of UConn, another shooter. Kind of pairs him up with Colin Knippel. I'll be interested to see how that fits. Liam McNeely he's also 6'7", so I mean I don't know. I don't understand why drafting two guys with similar archetypes, right? And so maybe they'll make some trades that we don't know of. Maybe because now they're kind of weak at the center position, so maybe they'll address that in the second round, as they do have two of the top second round picks to begin the draft. And maybe that's why they went with Liam McNeely, one of the best players left on the board. They addressed the need. They just addressed, get a good player, and then they can address their need of now they need a big man with their early second round picks. And looking into tonight, nothing crazy. You'll have some teams that didn't draft last night, like the Milwaukee Bucks, like the LA, apparently traded to the Bulls, but apparently did this swap for something. But the Lakers will pick this tonight. The Cavs will pick tonight. The Knicks may pick tonight as well. And so you're going to get teams that are making noise in the NBA draft that couldn't last night because of some of the trades they made with some of their players a couple years ago. And so overall, just another standard NBA draft. Nothing crazy as a whole. I'm still reeling from it. I'm a little tired today. I definitely got to get a coffee or something. But now we'll transition into maybe the biggest talking point of the draft, and it's going to be, how is Cooper Flagg going to fare with the Mavericks? And so I'm pretty excited about this. Let me get the. So Cooper Flagg has been drafted to the Dallas Mavericks. I'm really pumped about it. Let's dive into how he will fit. I was scrolling on Twitter here a little bit, and there was some Twitter conversations going on with how he'll kind of adjust, and we'll look at the starting lineup right now for the Mavericks, because I think it's a very interesting one. Shout out to Flag World, or I guess this is a FanDuel post, but we're going to use his tweet for this one. This is the potential offense that the Dallas Mavericks will start or eventually start this season. Obviously, Kyrie is kind of, a TBA of when he's going to return. But however, you got Klay Thompson, Anthony Davis, and Daniel Gafford / Derek Lively. I would assume Derek Lively is probably going to start with this lineup. And then you got Max Christie off the bench. So this isn't the complete lineup. However, I think he will have he's in a spot right now early on, depending on who they sign as their kind of rental point guard until Kyrie gets back, or at least rental starting point guard until Kyrie gets back. He'll have an opportunity to handle the ball a little bit, especially if they rock with him in the starting lineup with alongside Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson isn't necessarily a ball handler. He's more a come off the screen or, a pick and pop guy. So for him, he's going to have an opportunity to handle the ball. He did that in college a little bit. That's my big question mark in terms of how he'll adjust and how it will be really effective for the Mavericks early on, is how is he going to be able to handle the ball a little bit. He didn't have the craziest handle, but I'm not expecting him to go full Kyrie Irving. As long as he can handle it and maybe facilitate the offense a little bit, I think he'll be just fine. And maybe they'll play through the post and Anthony Davis, or he'll run the pick and roll with the center position, or any three of those forwards or any three of those big men for the Mavericks heading into the season. But once Kyrie gets back, then this team really hits its full stride, and that's where I'm really excited for Cooper Flagg, because then he'll be the Swiss Army knife that he is, right? And so for the Mavericks, Kyrie's obviously going to be really the facilitator and your main scorer, but Cooper Flagg has shown he can catch or shoot off the catch. He can slash to the hoop. He can, cut to the hoop and score that way. It's really going to unlock this offense once he gets unrestrained by the fact of maybe he'll have to bring up the ball, or it's really kind of a big man-centric team until Kyrie gets back. Now, that could change maybe if they sign Chris Paul, D'Angelo Russell. Those are some teams, Malcolm Brogdon. Those are some of the names floating around for the Mavericks as of right now. But still, I think he is in an opportunity right now to kind of take a back seat, which I think is great for a rookie to have. Most of these rookies are kind of forced to be the driving of the team, like an Ace Bailey. He might have to be the guy in Utah. A Dylan Harper is kind of in a similar position. He doesn't have to be the main guy. There's so many good players on the Spurs. He can kind of just adjust and play his game. And I think Cooper Flagg's in a very similar position this year. That doesn't mean that he can't live up to expectations, or he can't, have huge expectations. I think there's still high expectations, being the first overall pick, being the Rookie of the Year favorite. I think for him, the things I would love to see off the bat is just his, how he affects the game, the little things. I think the defense will be there. I almost want to say that's a guarantee for him to have the defense. It'll be really just the offense. And I'm not saying just the shooting, it's more or less the attacking, which I'm not like saying it's going to be bad. I'm just going to keep my eye on and see how he adjusts. The Summer League starts here in a couple of weeks. I'm excited to see how he has his first minutes as a Dallas Maverick. But again, his expectations should be Rookie of the Year. However, I think for him, it's going to be, I want to say a slow start by any means, but it's going to be more of a transition for this Dallas team as a whole, because you really only got a limited games from Anthony Davis. Kyrie's still out. You're going to have a new point guard potentially starting on night 1. And so you're going to be rocking with, 3 potentially new faces in that starting lineup, and that may take a little bit of adjustment period, not even just for Cooper Flagg, but for the team as a whole. And I think AD will hopefully come off to a great start, and if he can stay healthy, it'll be a great thing, because he's going to be really, I want to say like the MVP candidate for this team, but he'll really be the engine that keeps this team afloat, and really between the 8th seed and the 6th seed range. That's where I have them until Kyrie gets back. That may be higher expectations than most, but I think they can stay afloat, especially with this addition of Cooper Flagg before Kyrie gets back. And then if Kyrie gets back and they can get hot, they could potentially be as high as a 3rd seed. I don't see them getting a top 2 seed just because of the missed time Kyrie's going to have. I think that'll be too many missed games for them to climb, especially with an OKC team and maybe a Houston team that's going to make some noise here this next season. So overall, I think this was a great pickup for the Mavs. Obviously, no brainer there. However, it will be, I think, a little bit of a slow start for their season. However, it's going to be quite the experiment for Jason Kidd to really build this offense, because the defense will be there. The defense will be must watch. The offense may be a little slow off the gate, but I think that's just going to be growing pains this regular season. And so now it's going to talk about the winners of round 1 as we go back to the draft board here. I would want to say the Utah Jazz did a great job. You'll probably read that on articles anywhere. The Utah Jazz did a really solid job with their draft, addressing the need in scoring, but also point guard. And now they're going to move, into potentially free agency. Do they make some trades? Do they trade Colin Sexton? Some other winners, the Spurs. We do actually have a winner or an article here that we're going to dissect. So let's dive into it a little bit. This is from Hoops Hype. Like I said, the Utah Jazz getting Ace Bailey, Walter Claytor Jr. Obviously, he didn't want to go there, but I think he'll show out. And again, Utah doesn't have really much expectations. The Charlotte Hornets, to me, I want to say they're a winner. I would say they're more of the middle ground. But apparently they added multiple virtual shooters and decent defenders. I think that's huge to space the floor. You saw that with the OKC Thunder, their ability to have multiple shooters, versatile shooters that can drive to the hoop, but also play solid defense. It's gonna be interesting to see how they get both these wings in the lineup at the same time with the LaMelo Ball and a Brandon Miller. I just don't think that's gonna happen. They'll probably split minutes, but it's going to be a cool experiment to hopefully get some hype for their upcoming season. Then the Washington Wizards had a very solid draft, getting Trey Johnson, Will Riley. They just kind of need help all around, and so if Trey Johnson can be this guy, this would have been the guy I would have loved the Mavs to get at 11. Obviously, he went 6, but if the Mavs didn't move up, earlier in the draft to get Cooper Flagg, this would have been a guy I would have targeted if I was the Mavs. But he's gonna bring like the smoothest pull up. And he's a natural scorer, and I think that's something the Wizards need. They just need more scoring, especially since they moved off Jordan Poole. They're kind of rocking with Chris Middleton and Marcus Smart. It's kind of rough this day and age, so they definitely need some youth, and they get some defensive help in Will Riley as well. Like I said, with the Phoenix Suns, they did a great job. The Mark Williams trade's a little weird, but however, I still think they did a great job. The Memphis Grizzlies, Cedric Howard, he's another underrated pick this season or this draft for the Grizzlies. They're looking for more help. They kind of filled that hole that Desmond Bane left with the Grizzlies. And so, they're kind of in a weird stage right now of, do we compete? Do we tank? It'll be really question marks until they decide what to do with Ja, if they extend him or if they trade and move off him. This Noah Ionescu guy from the Bulls, don't know too much about him. He's from France, but he brings an athletic burst, rim finishing overseas pedigree. So I think the big thing here is he needs to polish his three-point stroke and consistency on defense. I think that's a little tough for the Bulls. I think they would have loved to get a Malawach or even a big man in this draft, but they decided to go with a 6'10 forward / wing. I mean, you could play small ball 5. So I don't think that's too crazy for the Bulls. And then obviously the Spurs, like I've mentioned before. Miami Heat, like I said, getting Janikowskis to fall to them at 20. Then we get some of the losers. And this is where I really wanted to talk about the New Orleans Pelicans, because they got a guy in Derek Queen, right? He balled out in the tournament, had a game-winning shot. and they got Jeremiah Fears. And so for them, their picks are great, but the trades they had to do to get these players is a little bit extreme. They traded their first round pick next year. And if you know anything about, expectations for next season, the Pelicans, they're probably going to be one of the worst teams next year. Now, if Zion can stay healthy, Jordan Poole has a little bit of resurgence, both these two players make some noise, maybe they'll climb out of the play-in. But as tough as the West is, I just don't see that happening. They could their peak is probably a play-in team. So trading that pick could backfire. In this article, they point out the fact that the Clippers traded away a pick that turned out to be the number 1 overall pick and ended up being Kyrie Irving. So hopefully the Pelicans do well enough to avoid that situation. Then Hazan Yang for the Trailblazers. Apparently that was a reach. And then the Brooklyn Nets had 5 first-round picks, and none of them seemed to make a lot of noise, which is just unfortunate for a Brooklyn organization that's looking to make, some headlines this season, especially because the East is very lackluster this season. Maybe they can make the postseason. That'll be interesting to see how any of their rookies develop. I didn't even talk about any of them just because they're kind of no names at this point, until hopefully they make some noise. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about the KD trade for the Rockets. And this is just going to be brief. It's going to be a brief show today since we started so late. However, I do want to get into the KD trade and what I think it means for the Rockets. And I think this is a massive W for the Rockets. Let me look this up because I think they needed the guy. They needed a go-to guy in the clutch minutes. We saw that happen in the Golden State series that kind of, fell flat. And so can I just get the trade details, please? And so for the Rockets to not give up too much. Yes, they gave up Jalen Green, a young, nice star, but you saw in the postseason he kind of fell off a little bit. And so now you get KD, who's maybe has 3 to 4 years left as of right now. Nothing crazy, but still, it's definitely a win now move. They moved off Dylan Brooks, a young, scrappy shooting guard, mostly known for his defense, 3-and-D player, and then they moved off the 10th pick this year. So I don't think that's too much of a. I think that's everyone was talking about how the Suns were fleeced. When you look at what the Rockets kind of had to have to make this trade, like they have had to have the cap space, or at least the players to even out the cap situation. And they only gave up 1 first-round pick that ended up being a big man, and I don't think the Rockets really needed a big man at that position. With Albert Sengun, they just re-signed Stephen Adams, and so it's maybe not a position of need right now. It could be in the future, but for right now, I think the Rockets currently have a top roster in the West, which is crazy to say, just for the fact of how stacked the West is, but also just how how good the Rockets were last season. They were they were the 2nd seed in the postseason. And now they add a guy like KD that hopefully can take them over the top. They haven't won a playoff series, I believe, since 2018. And so for them, it's going to be really, really crucial for them to get some postseason success. And I think with this KD move, they're at least guaranteed to make the 2nd round. But it's going to be interesting to see the flaws with this team. You're going to say, oh, they got the defense. Now they have the offense. Their offense wasn't necessarily an issue. They're more proud on defense. But I feel like there could be something wrong with this team. I just don't know what to put my finger on. Could it be the second, who's going to be that second guy, Albert Sengun? How does he work with KD? Or is it a Fred VanVleet who just signed an extension? It's going to be big question marks for the Rockets to address, but I think those are good problems to have because you have such great players. And then there were some other trades like the, Drew Holiday, the Trailblazers. Don't know what the Trailblazers are doing with that. The fact that the Boston Celtics were able to get out of cap hell without trading any picks, or at least first-round picks, I think is huge. Yes, their roster doesn't look too hot, right? With Tatum being out, with you losing Drew Holiday, with you losing Porzingis, it's not the prettiest roster right now. I think they have Xavier Tillman at the starting center, which is not ideal. Maybe they'll re-sign Al Horford if he doesn't retire. So they got some question marks as we get closer and closer to free agency. And so those are just a couple of the little trades. I'll do more of a dissection. I just wanted to kind of do a brief touch with you guys, keep this stream a little bit short. Thank you for joining me once again. This will do it for this episode. It's been short. It's been quiet. I just want to get back in the flow of things. I will be live tomorrow at 11 Central, 12 Eastern. So thank you for joining me once again for this another episode of You Don't Know Jack. Have a great rest of your day.